Rose. I'm a professor of economics at University of Missouri, St. Louis. I've been interested in moral behavior generally, particularly as it helps human beings advance. I think that we've done a very good job improving our understanding of how institutions can help human beings create better societies, and certainly institutions have been wonderful. But I think we're at the point of diminishing returns with institutions. We've probably learned about as much as we're going to learn. We've probably answered about as many questions that are hard questions as we're going to answer. In my view, the real action now is in culture. That culture is the key to understanding why it is that the institutions that we take for granted in places like the United States and England and so on and so forth, why those institutions often don't work in many other parts of the world, or if they do work, they don't work nearly as well. So that's how I became interested in culture. A really important part of culture, of course, is the moral beliefs, particularly the prevailing moral beliefs of a particular society. So I began thinking carefully then about how specific moral beliefs might do a better job helping a society thrive than other moral beliefs. And of course, that's an extremely touchy subject. You talk about wandering into a minefield, but if it just seemed, I was so sure that it was the case that no single factor was more important for understanding the differential success societies than the moral beliefs of the people who comprised them, that I was willing to bear the cost of pressing on. So that's what I've been working on, and one of the natural byproducts of this work is it has provided a new framework for understanding appropriate business ethics from the point of view of how do we get firms to do the kinds of things that would best serve the common good, and from the point of view of a framework for the actual teaching of business ethics. I believe the way we teach business ethics today, and there are certainly many exceptions to this, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but I would say for the majority of people who teach business ethics today, the way it is taught is, and often does more harm than good. Now, there's no way for me to back that up, but I have specific arguments for why that might be the case. And so I'm now very interested in applying what we know about the reality of actual human beings because of what we've learned about ourselves from evolutionary psychology, and to inform a better way of teaching business ethics, and to help us do a better job designing ethical systems within firms. So we will do a better job teaching it in classrooms. We'll do a better job designing our organizational and institutional mechanisms within firms. And we'll do a better job of routinizing a kind of continuing education that I think is really, really important and very overlooked in modern business firms, because many people are very, very good-hearted people, and they basically do want to do the right thing, but it's extremely difficult to do if they feel like everybody around them is skirting the rules, and everybody around them is essentially appearing to be much more productive than they are and much more successful than they are, but they're doing it essentially by cheating. That's very corrosive, and so I do think it's very important to put mechanisms in place that keep revisiting ethics in a firm, and not just rah-rah, but actually work through specific exercises, so on and so forth, so everybody understands we're all on the same page, and we're not going to tolerate people who just refuse to maintain a very high standard of ethical conduct. I don't think it's straight. I just don't think it ever was there. Our default way of thinking about morality is a way that would give us the biggest returns in the context within which we actually evolved. And the vast majority of our current genomic existence is one in which we lived in extremely small groups. So what kinds of things work well in small groups? Well, the kinds of things that work well in small groups are ways of organizing economic activity, social activity, any kind of activity for that matter, so as to achieve basically a kind of utilitarian objective that's actuated and informed by a very strong sense of empathy. This makes perfect sense. Central planning, although many market economists really hate central planning, central planning only for the first 99.9% of our existence has in fact been by far and away the most efficient way to organize economic activity. It just simply is. When you're in very small groups, the competing model, which would be kind of markets to effectuate coordination, are meaningless. There's no such thing as a market price in a family or a market price in a tribal village. I mean, it's just nonsense. So that stuff's not even really on the table. So that's kind of how we come naturally to the table when we're thinking about ethics. Is we have a number of moral values that some of which are, you can imagine, having a positive algebraic sign, some have a negative algebraic sign, and they all have different absolute values to capture the relative strength. And moral thinking and reasoning is all about weighing these things out. Their values can be conditional on circumstances, of course. And their values are informed by our intensely acute sense of empathy, which I'm a big fan of. I mean, as you know, that's, I think Gustave Galbert was absolutely right when he said that was the root of evil, that it was the absence of empathy. But it's a scary thing when a person has no sense of empathy, that's for sure. So using our faculties of empathy in order to produce a kind of general utilitarian outcome through a central planning mechanism that has a heavy dose of redistribution. The groups that didn't do it didn't exist long because it's just so doggone efficient. So that's kind of what we do naturally, and so unless we have a particular reason to deviate from that, that's our default. Nothing wrong with that. So, but the problem is, what works really well in small groups has no particular reason to produce any kind of good payoff in large groups. And I think that's exactly what's going on in human societies. And the reason why we have advanced is we figured out ways to overcome our small group nature, our petty, tribal, nasty, provincial small group nature. A phrase that David Sloan Wilson used earlier, which I liked quite a bit, was I think it was a cultural workaround. I'd never heard that before. So what a great phrase. I mean, it's because that culture often works exactly that way. How can we use our greatest asset, which is our cerebral cortex, which is amazingly pliable and creative and can change on a dime, eminently adaptable. How can we use that to circumvent problems and circumvent limitations that are a byproduct of our hardwiring? I think that's kind of the new level of excitement for evolutionary theory. I think there's a good reason why you're seeing so much enthusiasm for people bringing the concept of culture with evolutionary theory together. Culture's getting hot, evolutionary theory is getting hot. Again, multi-level selection, which for the life of me, I can never understand why people thought that being against that was some kind of acid test it makes no sense to me at all. I mean, of course there's multi-level selection. Now, how it works, that's hard. Have we figured out the best way to model it? Probably not. But does it happen? How could it not happen? I think that's where the real excitement is now, because societies who can figure out superior cultural workarounds, precisely because they have deeper scientific insight into how multi-level selection has worked in the past, and we can learn from the past, those societies will be able to overcome institutional limitations that they might not have even known they had.